Hello and welcome to What the Luxe with me, Fred Moore.
And me, Anant Sharma.
Together we lead Matter of Form, a design consultancy specialising in brand, digital experience and content. And this is a podcast that calls time on tired ideas of luxury.
Alongside industry luminaries and thought leaders, we explore what truly defines category-leading products and services.
Welcome to this, the emergency Christmas Eve edition of What the Luxe, our most self-indulgent and self-referential episode yet. After 70 episodes nearly in 3 years of the podcast, and with some of the world's best brands in luxury, I would say, on, we thought it was time for a chat between Anant Sharma, CEO, founder of Matter of Form, recently established luxury tastemaker, travelling salesman, you name it, and myself, Fred Moore. So we're going to have a nakedly personal chat about what's been going on Matter of Form, talk about ourselves for this emergency Christmas one. And Nant, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be a guest rather than an interviewer. And also thank you, Fred, for the Guinness, because firstly, I've never had a Guinness in my life, so it's nice for this to be my first moment having one, and secondly, on air, and secondly, it's actually very sensitive of you to get me a 0% one, because as you know, I've given up drinking for a year, but you are the sort of person who'd go out of your way to buy me a 5% one, knowing that.
Do you know what? Of all the things over the last 3 years you've done, while this podcast has been going on, giving up drinking is an astonishing achievement, given your previous form on that. So well done. So I wasn't going to give you a
There were a lot of
Guinness.
indiscriminate Mondays.
Yeah, we've all been there.
You're still there.
I'm still there. Yeah, so Anant, it's been a huge year for Matter of Form, exhausting in many ways. We've come to the end of it. What are a couple of the standout moments or highlights for you?
Well, look, I love doing the podcast, firstly, and I love the fact that we take a real point of doing them face to face, because I think the body language and just being physically present changes the shape of the conversation. We prepare these like discussion guides, and I
don't think you've ever followed one.
I'm not great at reading them, and I've never made it past question 2. And then I do the same outro questions, which are, even though they're the same every time, I forget and have to read. But I feel so privileged to speak to these incredibly intelligent people, and it's humbling. And it's a fun mission when I travel to go and find a studio. We've got studios in every country now.
These days it's studios, not girlfriends, sadly.
So yeah, that's the sales strategy's changed. It's incredible. It's like, and it's made me a better listener, actually. And I wasn't a great one 10 years ago. And I'm now a better one because I've had to listen to me not listening.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Yeah, always got the gags. Like the podcast started as a joke.
Yeah.
It was a joke.
So I re-listened to the first episode.
I can't bring myself to.
And it's amazing the people we've had on the podcast.
Yeah, it's good. And it was your idea. And I couldn't even listen to myself. We come from a generation where it wasn't normal to listen to yourself. It took me a long time to see myself on film. I couldn't listen to my own voice. It's like I had to break the ice with it. It was only by season 2 I was listening to them. I still can't listen to.
So this is what I think some people will know you on this listening to this podcast. Some might. They'd be interested to know that you are not a narcissistic public speaker. You actually find it quite hard.
I find it difficult.
Yeah.
I'm accidentally good at it, I think.
Yeah.
But it doesn't come naturally to me. Well, it doesn't come naturally to embrace being on stage, you know.
I just think one of the things, and what we do and what we work in, is that the world, I'd say at the end of 2025, the world is about as scary and upsetting, particularly in Europe, as you could get, but actually that applies elsewhere. And we do work in a kind of positive, joyful industry where people get together at conferences, have a good time, they've got plans, they've got things they're doing that are really interesting and benefit other people. So we're lucky, really.
We're in the business of experiences, and the value of an experience is always valuable, you know, because that's how human beings are wired. We're wired for adventure and to be curious and to explore. And I think it's been tougher in other parts of luxury. You know, I think that the meaning of something that's mass manufactured, that's expensive because of its status, I think that's a harder sell than it used to be. And so I think the inside has become more valuable than the outside, the story and the provenance. And I'm going to say this, but it sounds a bit weird, but I feel like human beings always value the suffering of other human beings. And I don't mean that necessarily in a negative way, but I think you need to know that someone else has made a sacrifice for something to truly value it. And I think if you really unpick everything, that's why like an Hermes bag is more valuable than a mass-produced one, or why something made in one country might feel less valuable than something made in another, because there's like an opportunity cost that exists within the thing, and then a soulfulness that's born of the the skill and craft that's like passed from one generation to the next, and then like within the thing. And I think all of those things, what I've really enjoyed about this year is adults who play this game of life have had to unpick the meaning of things, and I think it's quite farcical actually, like a lot of this like sort of structure of life that we live in, and the stories we tell ourselves and the things we convince ourselves are fine when we're adults and we buy into this or that. And I think AI and how it's changing the concept of value and what we spend our time doing and what creativity is, and what effort is and how it should be valued and rewarded is up for discussion. And that discussion has been a part of all of the What the Luxes that we've had, and it's been part of many of the pitches we've had, and it's been a key theme in most of the projects we work on. And the meaning of value and the context, how things become personally valuable to individuals and how it makes them feel differently has been something that's been very interesting to explore, both from a psychological perspective, from a sensory perspective, from a physical experience perspective, and for me, that's been a journey because we started digital. When we began as a business 16 years ago, we were in the business of innovation, and innovation was digital. And now, ironically, it's all flipped, and innovation is about the senses and slowing down and
Storytelling.
And getting people to engage their attention, because we have more attention available than we give each other credit for. But luxury provides a medium that warrants attention because people place a premium on it because they paid for it.
So I listened back to that first podcast, like I say, 3 years ago, almost to the day. And that would be the consistent theme. I would say about a quarter of that podcast was taken talking up about scarcity and value, a fascinating topic. One you are going to write a book on.
I've been a bit disillusioned about.
You're not going to write a book on it.
Well, I've sort of written 2 chapters, but it's difficult to motivate yourself to write things like books at the moment because of AI. Yeah. And I find that something that does trouble me is the inability for many people to discern between what's human written and what's written by AI. And we all struggle with different parts of what AI achieves, probably based on when they threaten our own skill sets. So I enjoy writing, but I also believe that we've used technology to create time in life to connect with each other and spend more time with each other and be creative, and then maybe that's a highfalutin belief I have, because not everyone wants to go and be creative, frankly. People just want to relax, and there are many ways in which people want to spend their time, play sport, compete, whatever. But I'm a creative person, and so for me, that's one of the key, I believe that human beings are fundamentally creative creatures. And so, but I think also how we communicate is key. And I think when you create this layer of obfuscation between each other, and that becomes like machine made, I think we lose something really fundamental, which is.
So where do you start? So since we're on AI, it's what everyone is sort of talking about, either overtly or it comes up pretty quickly. There's a spectrum between what one friend said the other day at lunch, which I thought was very good. He wasn't worried at all. He just quoted from that great book, The Leopard, and said, everything must change, so everything must stay the same. It's just it's another evolution. To other people who say we're completely fucked. Excuse my French. Yeah. Where do you stand on that? Because there's a bit of a gloom around about it.
Do you want my honest opinion?
Yeah. Please don't be too nihilist, because
it's Christmas Eve.
Yeah, we've got an audience to satisfy, so cheer up before Christmas.
Okay. Look, I think well, everything's going to be great. We're going to have loads of time. We're going to have 4-hour work weeks.
We both had children in the last few years. We're going through that stage. Do you think they're going to have a better time of it than we did, or a worse time? I think we were born in the 80s, early 80s, quite a halcyon sort of time.
I think there's going to be a cat fight for value, and value is rewarded financially. And so I think like how we work and what we do is going to become harder to prove worth. Yeah. I just do think that
in the professional domain.
Yeah, and I think professional services will change quite a bit. And so yeah, I think it will be difficult, and I think the value of physical assets will increase significantly. So I think that will increase the wealth disparity. I think there'll be exponential multiplication of physical asset value, and I think it will be harder to create value in.
But do you think Indian cocoa, when they get into the job market, will have as hard a time, an easier time, or a worse time? Or do you just not know?
I think they're going to have a harder time. I think there's going to be more competition, and I think it's going to be harder to define what is valuable and what it's worth. But who knows what could happen? You know, many developed in inverted commas countries have declining populations. You know, it's the fifth stage of the demographic transition, as it's referred to as. And people forget, because Ray Dalio talks about this often, you know, your aperture is fairly limited and you tend to be part of one cycle that's either going up or down. So, but you have to zoom out about 1.5 generations to see the cyclical nature of things. You know, you tend to think things always get better or always get worse. And we're very biased by that based on what point in time we're born into. It doesn't take much for, like, you know, I just said asset values being created. You know, the truth is all it takes is for everyone to just have one child instead of three, and the global population halves. And then there's an awful lot of extra housing all of a sudden, you know. So, I mean, I'm no economist, but it's like, you know.
I struggle with that. I think no, we're lucky. We get to go to, we open an office in the Middle East, and we get to travel to America, South America, Asia, all these wonderful places. But I struggle with the fact that Europe, which is still, I think, the most lovely place to live in the whole world, is also, I think, the most hopeless place on a kind of 10 or 20 year view. I don't know where Europe goes. I really struggle with that one. It's unreconciled for me.
Yeah, I think there are like weird factors at play with that, which is, I think there's probably like a complacency based on sort of strength, historical strength of standing on a global stage that sort of prevents, or it's just not an environment that fosters much innovation, you know.
No, it's the sort of, it's the sort of post-welfare model and all that. It's a problem.
You know, but the truth is, I think it's like we've also created a world that doesn't necessarily promote conditions for like living well. It promotes like capitalism and as a result, hyper individualism. And it's like, if life is just about business and throughput and success is increase of GDP and more stuff being made to fix problems, then yes, like there are other countries probably do that better at the expense of culture and at the expense of what it means to live well, you know, and so sort of buying those as luxuries now, you know, what it means to live well, but it's not standard. It's not the baseline. It's not like living life well. That's become a premium product that you buy off the shelf.
Yeah. I'm really enjoying, by the way, just the rambling, random nature of this podcast. I'm not sure many other people will, but we'll still release it. Perhaps people are getting insight into the Match Reform office on a Friday afternoon. So I went back to that podcast today, and actually the same 4 questions we ask all of our guests, which is good actually, because you get a sense of some themes over 70 podcasts. But can you remember the answers you had to those questions?
I have no idea. I haven't even listened to it once. Well, but that was honestly in a period of time where I thought it was just far too cringe to listen to the podcast. And now I can listen to them, but I can't watch them.
Yeah, I'm the opposite.
Really? That's because you're a narcissist.
So the answer to the first one, he said, the thing that annoys you most about your industry. Can you guess what you said?
No, I really have no idea.
What would you say now?
Ooh, what annoys me about our industry? I think sometimes we can overcomplicate things that are very, very simple. And I think sometimes we can make light of things or treat things far too simply, that actually there's a depth of complexity to that we can be quite sort of in our tunnel about. So that slightly annoys me. And then look, I see Matter Reform as part of the luxury and experience economy industry, which is an industry I love. We're probably a bit detached from the marketing and advertising industry. And
thank God.
Yes, thank God. I mean, it's an industry I love. You know, I love.
No, only because of I say that only because of the problems that industry is
problems,
having.
exactly.
Yeah, not because of the.
We're only a couple of weeks off the 4,000 layoffs in the big holdcos, right? So, but I think people can take themselves quite seriously. And honestly, the one thing I have a huge amount of pride for in the culture of Matter Reform is we're very relaxed. And when people come from the advertising industry into Matter Reform, because you hire from all sorts of places, they're not just from the luxury. In fact, barely no one comes from the luxury industry. I think what I'm proud of, and you're so good at doing, and hopefully I am as well to some extent, probably not as much, is being self-deprecating enough to force other people's edge to come off as well. You know, I think like when you humiliate yourselves and everyone around you, you create a fairly open environment, and actually that breeds great work.
Yeah, isn't that what a learning in life when we meet these amazing people who've created these businesses or run whatever, these businesses, they are so humble on the whole, with a few exceptions.
I've been humbled this week. I've had this week. I've got more than ever to do, as everyone does in the last week before Christmas. And for some reason, I'm sitting here in a Christmas jumper talking to you. But that aside, I've been traveling a lot, and so Molly, my poor EA, our poor EA, has been rescheduling everything into this week, and obviously things that are important but they're not vital. And so what's happened this week is I've basically been in a therapy session back to back with people who need advice. And I've just basically listened non-stop from like 7:30 a.m. yesterday. No, people have been coming into the office and with career advice. A wonderful lady who she wrote about it on LinkedIn today, actually. So I think it's okay for me to say, wanted advice for her ADHD daughter.
Yeah, our mutual friends. Yeah.
Mutual friend. Someone else wanted to move from a big fashion brand onto agency side. The CEO of a major fashion company wanted to move into hospitality. I've basically just been listening to people, and not just that, also sort of, people who've just graduated, who are just deeply confused about what their future might look like, and where they can build their career that's going to be valuable. And it's been a searching, because I have to have the answers actually, and actually it's just made me ask myself some questions so it's just been a very anomalous, strange week of all of these meetings that have just been kicked a bit down the line for the last 3 months because of last minute travel and priorities and that type of thing. And actually,
it's quite a nice bookend to a year, I think.
It's a nice way to finish, actually. It feels oddly like there's a bit of giving back in a not hugely proactive way, but at least listening and attempting to help people.
Really interesting. What you actually said, by the way, just to go back to the initial thing, was the thing that wound you up most was, if you take our business model as agency bullshit. So I sort of think that's ended, really, because our whole wider business ecosystem's been so humbled by AI and stuff that I think that's finished. And the second was like overly buttoned up luxury, so you sort of pointed to both those things. The second question we always ask people, which you always forget to ask, is what most concerns you about the world we're leaving our next generation? Can you remember what you said?
No, but I'm delighted that you noticed that I always forget to ask that question, because that means you actually listen to the podcast.
Not all of yours, most.
Enough to be able to say that with some statistical accuracy. The world that we're leaving the next generation, it's how we connect with each other.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting. You've said exactly the same thing 3 years later.
I think most people are worried about that. I think most people...
But we did the first year of the podcast, and everyone, as I would bang on about this, a bit boring, but everyone's was around environment and sustainability, which was just obviously like a huge concern of everyone. And then suddenly
Funny how people aren't talking about that as much.
It flipped a year in to almost nearly like 90-95% of all podcasts are people saying something.
Did you ask our What the Luxe GPT that?
Yeah, exactly. What the
We have one, by the way. It's great.
And they say a riff off technology, connection, distraction.
As part of my therapy sessions with people over the last 10 days.
Are you in therapy?
No, just get with the program.
Oh, sorry.
As part of me listening to people.
It should be.
Thanks. I spoke to someone, and he was talking about his daughter, and he was saying, she's beautiful, 18-year-old daughter. And I think she might have even been older. I can't remember now. Maybe she's at university, so probably 20s. He said that she'd never had a boyfriend, and he was talking about how worried he was. And he was like, he would watch the guys, like come over to the house and their parties and things like this. And he was just like, they're just getting it so wrong. The courting process, they're just not on it. They don't understand how to do it.
I mean, not as wrong as I got it.
You've been a disaster always. I've unfortunately had to follow your dating career, and thank God Izzy's taken you in, because you wasn't pretty when you were single. But then I remember those days. It does seem like a long time ago. But his daughter isn't coy or shy, but the entire process of courtship has become terrifying, because it's too recorded, too filmed, too this cancel culture, that the digitization of interaction, and there's a phenomena in South Korea. It's called hikikomori, and it's this is what happens when people can't make eye contact with each other. And actually, there's a whole thing that's a sort of therapy center of people who'd spent so long playing video games that actually they'd lost the inner confidence. If you don't have inner confidence, you actually can't look someone in the eye. It's actually one of the hardest things to do, to look someone else in the eye when you don't feel good about yourself. It's a funny thing, you know, human beings, you can't.
We're not so dissimilar from animals.
Yeah.
So obviously 70 episodes in, and as stated, like, we've been very, very lucky to speak to some of these people. Are there any conversations that have really, really stayed with you from those 70? Unfair to pick out a favourite, but are there one or two that you can highlight?
The ones that stayed with me were the ones that are a bit different. So talking to Jeff Staple, he's the guy who designed the Nike Pigeon sneaker. And that sneaker, and the pigeon was like a symbol of New York. Maybe it became a symbol of New York as a result of the sneaker. I can't quite remember now. But this guy, when he launched the Nike Pigeon sneaker, there were riots in New York. And what I think is interesting about it is it's when skate culture suddenly went mainstream, and now it's like luxury. And now you see all of these like urban cultures like make their way into like the world of luxury and get adopted as status symbols. But it was like a moment in time. It was when like people at the skate park, you know, was suddenly wearing shoes that all of New York wanted. And they're throwing, I mean, it wasn't good. They're throwing bricks through windows, you know. It was like,
Yeah.
it was a problem. I like that one. I like the one that you did with the founder of Dishoom. I think it's funny because like everyone's just talking about it the whole time now because it's become like a study in behavioral economics. Like, you know, the muck tea, you know, you roll the dice for like loyalty, and if you roll a double six, you get the meal free, and that's like that's the equivalent of a 16.6% discount on your meal. But my God, it's a more fun form of loyalty than points.
I just love that episode as well because of what Kavi said about the one thing you don't do as the son of Indian immigrants is start an Indian restaurant. You know, become a doctor.
Yeah, exactly. So I like those ones. Look, I like talking to Marek Reichman, you know. I mean, the guy's designed every Aston Martin for the last 15 years.
Yes.
You know, he goes to the pub on a Sunday and has a pint with Norman Foster. They made the Route Master together. You know, I mean, this guy it's like talking to Johnny Ive. And his love for design was like forged in like a blacksmithery, you know. I mean, he grew up in the, you know, black country, like, but you know, with his dad who's a, you know, and then he's turned that like heavy industry into like beautiful design, but with a sense of what it takes to actually build as an OEM, like stuff that's fairly hardcore. And so I enjoyed talking to him a lot.
Trying to find the first episode and scrolling down the Spotify feed or whatever you call it. And I saw the number 2 or 3 was a friend of mine called Sam, who I was at university with years ago and moved to LA. And just what I love about, we work a lot in luxury travel, is the community and the spirit of it and sort of coming together with people. There's no sense of sort of jealousy or competition or envy, particularly as industries
It's
go.
a good
And I love
industry for
that. And
that.
it was really lovely that he's done so well with his All Roads North business, taking people on the
I
great
saw him actually
American,
in Morocco recently.
yeah, the great American road trip. And it's really lovely to be in an industry with proper people.
Travel's just a crazy industry. I was talking to Annie Fitzsimmons on Monday, and she has written a book called 100 Best Hotels of the World, and she wrote the book, and then she's just gone to 100 hotels. She spent 6 years traveling the world, being funded by National Geographic to just write. You know, I mean, she's got the best job.
There's
in
some
the
pretty
world.
cool
You know,
jobs
imagine
out
doing
there.
that in your 20s, based in Brooklyn, then being sent around the world. It's wild. So that one was good. And then, I don't know, you're talking about the archives. The one that really stayed with me actually was, there are two actually, and they're also a bit different, out of the world of travel and out of the world of luxury a bit. Well, not out of the world of luxury, but the first is Ben Goldsmith.
Yeah.
And talking about rewilding, and I guess its connection to luxury and hospitality and that kind of world was just actually what do we do with what as nations do we do with to protect our land? And it killed some fallacies around like the importance of agricultural land and like grade 1 and grade 2 farmland, stuff that I didn't really know before, where I was like, God, we really are just like wasting land based on like a fairly untrue thesis that like things should be turned into agricultural land when actually it's just wasting it. And of course, his daughter died in an accident on the land. And I thought it took tremendous bravery to open up about that and just talk about how it's changed him as a person and changed his priorities. So that was very, very, that was an intense episode. And, you know, I guess it took a lot to talk about that. I was very inspired by Anthea Peers, he's the president of Christie's, because she started as a PA at Christie's. Now she's the president. I mean, it's ridiculous. You know, I mean, and it's back then was a male dominated industry, you know, the world of arts, you know, for leadership at least, you know, and she is just an impressive woman who through brute force, has made it to the top in the world the world of auctions, the world of art. And she's the president of Christie's now. And she's a force of nature, and I've seen her all sorts of different places around the world because we've spoken at similar things. And she'll get off a plane and then she'll just be there. And just as if it's just not a hair out of place, just talking with such eloquence about whatever she needs to talk about, having just got off a 10-hour flight. It's just like, Anthea, I don't know how you do it, but she's a machine in a good way. So I thought that's the one worth listening to. Did one with Tom Goodwin, I quite liked.
Yeah, that was a cracker.
It's got quite a cringy beginning. I think both of us are a bit like, I asked him what luxury product he couldn't live without, and he starts talking about how he loves any metal suitcases. Basically, he's in love with his Rimowas, and it's funny because I'm in love with my suitcases as well. It's a weird, irrational connection I have. They're like pets. What about you? What are your favourite ones?
George Brooke at the Soak was fascinating. I just think we work a lot around that intersection of well-used words, longevity, wellness, mental health, all that sort of stuff. I think their angle of applying kind of almost good old-fashioned hospitality principles and warmth to a very kind of rigorous clinical approach is really, really interesting. And that's something we see all the time in project work, is that kind of spectrum of, call it spirituality versus, science or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I love that episode.
Linen in the lab coat,
exactly. But he unbelievably eloquent and interesting guy. And I love recently my sister-in-law Mia, who has in her 40s started a really well-beating wallpaper business, and just hearing that journey of how it took off in America, and doing it after having kids was really inspiring, but also satisfying for obvious reasons.
Talking of that, and as it is Christmas, one that is worth listening to is the Lapland interview as well, because Mike Battle,
I forgot about that. Yeah,
it's a couple of seasons ago, but Mike Battle, he
and Alison,
they went to Lapland with their kids, and they were so disappointed by a slightly inebriated Santa and an underwhelming reindeer that they came back and they set up an amazing Christmas experience in Ascot. And that experience is just become like a world lead. You know what I mean? They're sort of globally recognized as the best Christmas experience there is, constantly approached by,
and they have not sold out. Some absolutely amazing.
And now the thing that's most heartwarming about it is those 3 little kids who they took to Lapland, who they just wanted to provide, like the substance for their imagination to run wild, now run the business with them. And I just think it was so fun to work on that project. And then you did such a great job of interviewing Mike when he was on the podcast. I think that just feels quite fitting given the fact it's December the 24th.
So the third question I asked back then 3 years ago was, what job would you do if you had to give up this? Can you remember what you would have said?
I would have definitely said that I consider myself to be fairly unemployable, but
you did, and I agreed.
Is that what it was?
You then claimed to have had loads of jobs before, which you had serious jobs before, which I took issue with.
I would like to be an architect.
You banged on about like how much you love the intricacies of the product. So yeah, same sort of vibe.
I like movement through design.
Yeah.
I like functional design. So a matter of form is play on form follows function. So, and user experience, was like a version of that, which is like, how do you move people through an experience and get them to do something? And that's always excited me. And it's version 2 of my life would definitely be architectural.
So the built environment.
100%. And our business has gone that way. We've gone from being basically user experience into customer experience, and what that looks like irrespective of format or medium, and we're doing more work than ever looking at sensory aspects of how an experience unfolds and how a promise connects with all the senses. And I think that is going to be vital in the world where we have stripped those physical environments out of the everyday, we talk about it the whole time, but if you can Uber everything, figuratively speaking, into your home, then you need third spaces to then go and connect with others. And those have become luxuries on the whole, because there isn't a community centre anymore. There isn't. I was talking to Ollie Bengo from Coco. This guy's given a stage to everyone from Amy Winehouse to, everyone. He knows everyone. But he was saying how because those community space, there's so much serendipitous kind of like scouting that happens in those venues that are given to local communities where like the Gallagher brothers played, or like, and then the happenstance that's happened off the back of that's then resulted in Nebworth or whatever, and they don't exist anymore.
The Cavern Club in Liverpool.
They don't exist anymore, and so, and that's not third space, but like it's a form of it, isn't it? It's like, where do we congregate? It's an issue.
Do you know what? That's what I would do if I had another job and I had the means to do it. I think I'd create the perfect intimate concert venue. Take one of like the Empires or whatever, one of those sort of things. So as we're sort of nearing the end of us exhausting what few listeners we've got left to this podcast, what I thought I'd do, and I have not prepared these, but I thought I'd ask you some random questions.
They weren't random up till now.
No, highly structured and visage. So what's been the highlight the last 3 years for you personally?
Let me say this. I think the business we're in, which is, it sounds so cheesy, but I feel like we're in the business delivering like happiness and better emotion. And luxury can be fairly non-inclusive, is that a word? Yeah. It's not like it's expensive, and there's negative connotations to that. But it's also, in this world today, the luxuries are the things that actually just afford you time to slow down and appreciate things. And I think that feels like a noble cause in a world that's over-optimized. So I've enjoyed the increasing importance, in my opinion, or the worth of what we do. And then I've enjoyed coupling that with behavioral economics that we bake into our work, because I like the psychology of, like, I'm interested in why two people can be sitting in the same room having a different experience. And I'm interested in how brands can help reshape how people see things and how people feel things. And that's just endlessly fascinating to me. So I've really enjoyed that. I think like we've emerged as like a global leader in what we do. I'm really proud of that, and I think it's like becoming fairly indisputable, and I am honestly not as much of a narcissist to say that, unless I do sort of think that's sort of, and that's really nice.
No, I agree with that.
While being sort of fairly humble, I hope. And please call us out on it if the hate mail will come in. But I think that we've managed to do it while being fairly relaxed. And we haven't got everything right, of course not. But we sort of bumbled our way through it, but with quite a confidence, I think, as well. And I'm sort of proud of that. And then, I think we just built a proposition that's fairly evergreen. And, it's not, I feel excited about AI, not threatened by it because of what we do, but because we're the red thread across the whole experience. And think about the behavioral dynamics and sort of emotional hypothesis we're delivering against across the experience. And that, for me, is like, I feel quite safe, actually, compared to perhaps what is happening in the marketing and advertising industry. And and it's funny, like being flown around the world, speaking at things and being paid for it, because it's like weird to be paid for what is sort of your own marketing in a way. So that's quite it's quite gratifying.
What about on the personal front? Those two little people climbing to bed each morning.
Obviously there's like no greater joy than having children that one day will fly the nest. But these like having kids is amazing. I think it makes you far better at work. It's such a cliche, isn't it, to say that? But I'm definitely more focused, and you strip more out of your life, and you know what to say no to. But people love saying like you should say no to everything in life. But I think you've got to say yes to everything, and then you've got to say no to everything, and then you've got to say yes to everything again, and then you've got to say no to everything. It's a double diamond. It's a big innovation process, life. And you've got to explore what you like, but also explore what you absolutely don't like. And that should be the fuel to then drive what you love. And I'm just in a phase right now where I'm like, I'm on the other half of the double diamond, and it will go wide again at some point. But I'm enjoying just being fairly single-minded about what I do.
And parting message to everyone this Christmas. Maybe we should have just a toast.
Let's have a toast. Don't drink and drive.
Yeah, don't drink and podcast. And happy Christmas, everyone.
Happy Christmas.
Thanks so much for listening. This has been What the Luxe. You can find us on socials at @Reform, and drop us any questions or comments on Twitter using the hashtag #WhatTheLuxe. Or if you're a luxury brand looking for strategy and design that goes beyond the banal, get in touch via hello@matchreform.com and chat to one of our consultants.